Hey guys, Mike here with a big heart, and today I'm going to tell you all about the day I had my first implantable cardioverter defibrillator placed. So if you watched some of my previous videos, you know that I was diagnosed with a heart disease called Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy. I had just gone into sudden cardiac arrest, so I was a high risk to go into sudden cardiac arrest again. So the next plan was for my doctors to figure out how they were going to keep me safe and how I was going to kind of go on and be able to live my life. You know, I was 17 years old. I had one more year of high school. I was going to be going off to college and then, getting a job and kind of going through the real world. And it was really important that my doctors had a action plan in place to make sure that I could do all of that safely without the risk of, dying if I go into sudden cardiac arrest again. So the first part of the plan was to put me on some medication, a beta blocker. And they were experimenting with some different types of beta blockers. And the other side of the plan was they were going to place a implantable cardioverter defibrillator, also known as an ICD, into my chest. So the doctor that performs this procedure is called an electrophysiologist. So I met with my first electrophysiologist that day after I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and he told me about the process. And the plan was to place this object into my chest. And I remember being very uncomfortable by this because, again, I was 17, I was kind of just living a really normal life. And now, all of a sudden, I was going to have a defibrillator inside of my chest. And I kind of had all these questions like, what's it going to feel like? Am I going to notice it? Am I going to constantly be, touching it? Am I going to have trouble sleeping? Is it going to hurt? Is it going to bother me? How is it going to affect my life? And my doctor, the electrophysiologist, was such a great guy and really put my mind at ease and explained that, once the device was in and once I had kind of gone through the recovery for it, that it really wasn't going to affect my life. And, but I still had some nerves and, although he did everything he could to kind of put those nerves at ease. So the surgery to have a ICD placed is actually a relatively simple one. They have to make a small incision right here under my collarbone because at the time I was getting a transvenous ICD, which is basically a battery pack or a generator, kind of the size of maybe a deck of cards, a little smaller than that, I would say, and definitely not as thick. And that was going to be attached to two wires, and those two wires are going directly into my heart muscle. And the purpose of the ICD is that if I am living my day-to-day life, whether it's, walking from class to class in high school, or if I were exercising, or if I were sleeping, or whatever I was doing, and I went into cardiac arrest again, that this ICD would automatically read the heart rhythm and determine if my heart needed a shock. And if it did, it would automatically shock my heart back into a normal rhythm. So it was really going to be protection for me as I went on and lived my life. So I kind of got my mind at ease with the surgery. He explained that they were going to place it, and after the ICD was placed properly, they were going to test it. And basically what they have to do when they test it is they have to put your body into an arrhythmia that the device can read. So essentially they're putting your body into sudden cardiac arrest and waiting for the device to respond. Of course, there are backup plans in case the device does not work as planned. So, I knew that this was kind of the final step for me to go home, right? I had my cardiac arrest about 10 days earlier. I've been tired of sitting in the hospital bed all day. I really just wanted to get home. So I knew that getting the ICD in properly was kind of that final step. And once it was in and once they had monitored it for a day or so, they were going to let me go. So I was actually relatively excited for the surgery because I knew, it was, again, the final step in me getting out of here, out of the hospital. So I went in for surgery that day and they wheeled me down and, I was definitely really nervous, but I kind of accepted what was going to happen. They started putting some anesthesia into the IV in my arm and kind of had me start counting down from 10, and all of a sudden I was knocked out. I don't remember anything, of course. So the doctor did what he had to do. He made the incision, placed the device, got the leads in, everything was looking really good. And the last step was for them to test the device. When they test the device, the reason they test it is, again, they want to be sure and they want to be confident that the device is going to work when it's needed. For me, what they were doing was the device at that time, this was in 2006, it had a maximum voltage of 36 joules. So the device could shock at a maximum of 36 joules. What they wanted to see was the device shock at 26 joules and do its job at 26 joules because they wanted a 10 joule threshold, right? They didn't want the device to have to work on its maximum power in order to save my life. So they put my body in the arrhythmia and they had the device set at 26 joules and it didn't shock my heart out of it. They tried it again and again, and my blood pressure started to really drop, and my parents had been in the waiting room with my younger brother, and it had been longer than it was supposed to be. And the doctor came in with a really defeated look on his face and basically explained that the installation went perfectly, but the test did not. It didn't work at the capacity that he wanted it to and that he was confident in sending me home with. So I woke up from surgery expecting great news. I was expecting that it all went well. We're gonna keep you for a night and then we're gonna send you home. And unfortunately, that was not the news that I got. And it was very deflating and depressing, quite frankly, to hear that. I really wanted to go home. And hearing that the surgery didn't go as planned just was kind of like another roadblock in allowing me to do that. So next was, again, to come up with another plan. What were we gonna do to figure out how we're gonna get this device to work? So the electrophysiologist put his head together with a lot of other experienced doctors, and option one was going to be to add a third wire. If you remember, this device had 2 wires attached to it going into my heart muscle, and they thought that by adding a third wire, it would allow the device to shock where they wanted it to. The other plan was they were gonna lower my medication. And I had been on this beta blocker for a few days now. My body was adjusting to it. And, one doctor suggested that. And I remember my family and me, we were kind of taken aback by that. We didn't think it made any sense at all to lower my heart medication. This was a medication that was, keeping my heart rate and my blood pressure where it needed to be. But of course we listened to the doctor. So, they lowered the medication for a few days, and I started taking a beta blocker called Nadolol. And they were giving me 40 milligrams of it twice a day. And they decided that in a few more days, they were gonna put me back in surgery. And the first thing they were gonna do was test the device and see if the device worked at the 26 joule capacity that they wanted it to. If the device did not work, they were going to get me out of the, the arrhythmia, the cardiac arrest. And then they were gonna install the third wire from the device to my heart. So a few days went by, long days, long nights, because I just wasn't sleeping very well. And again, I was very anxious to just get out of the hospital and get home. But finally, the second surgery day was here, and they brought me in for surgery and tested the device 3 or 4 times, and it worked perfectly. So the change in medication made a big difference. And thankfully, they did not have to add that third wire. And the doctor excitedly went into the waiting room to tell my parents and my brother that all went well and that I was, they tested the device, it worked. They were gonna wake me up from surgery and let me recover and probably send me home the next day. So I woke up from surgery, and obviously I was very happy, to hear that all went well. And the next step was for me to go home. And, I knew that I needed this surgery to go well if I wanted to go home, and that's exactly what happened. And, as excited as I was to go home, it definitely was just the start of my journey living with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.